Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. Tonight, the push to get more people vaccinated. Plus, 3 years since the tragic plane crash in Iran. The pain of the losses here in our community still feel fresh. The fight to save the Ojibwe language. We'll tell you what's happening on Walpole Island First Nation to keep the traditional dialect alive. And a look at how Bill 124 contributed to the worsening staff shortages in healthcare. We'll tell you what internal briefing documents reveal. We begin tonight with low COVID-19 vaccination numbers in Windsor, Essex. Less than half of all residents in our community have received their third dose, and only 1 in 5 have received their fourth. This comes as a new variant of concern has been making the rounds in the United States. TJ Deere reports.
XBB.1.5 is a new subvariant of Omicron. According to the CDC, it's causing more than a quarter of cases in the U.S. The agency also says that nearby Monroe County in Michigan is seeing a high level of cases, whereas Wayne County, which is where Detroit is located, is at a medium level. Here in Windsor, the hospital's chief of staff has a warning.
We do know in Windsor, being a border city, that we are going to be one of the first areas in Canada to see a variant like this enter our community. And I don't think there's any question that it is already in our community.
According to the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit, as of January 4th, only 47.6% of residents have received their third jab, and just under 20% have received their fourth. According to Public Health Ontario, both tallies are roughly 3 percentage points lower than the provincial average. The county's acting medical officer of health calls the low numbers concerning.
I recognize that we're now in the third year of the pandemic, and but I think our best way to manage the pandemic and to manage COVID-19 is to minimize the burden of disease in the community.
To try and get more residents vaccinated, the local health unit is setting up pop-up clinics at community health centers across the county. This one in Leamington saw people come out to receive their booster shots. The clinic's director of clinical practice gave some reasons why residents might not want to get vaccinated.
I think overall folks are tired. There's vaccine fatigue. We also had to contend with Christmas and holidays. Folks that are showing up at my door are interested. They might explain why they haven't gotten it sooner, but sometimes that's logistics, sometimes it's access, sometimes it's fatigue, and some of the rumors out there.
Some migrant workers arrived on a bus to get their vaccines. Strathdy says they have a good relationship with the farms in the county and organizes the buses so the workers can get their shots as well. Language support, nursing staff, and providers that speak their language are on hand so the workers can have all their questions answered. Other migrant workers also showed up, and they understand the importance of getting the shot.
It's very important to get the vaccine because nowadays the COVID situation are getting worse in some areas and countries.
TJ Deere, CBC News, Windsor.
The University of Windsor and the Iranian community remembers those lost on flight PS 752 3 years ago. 176 people lost their lives after the passenger plane was shot down shortly after leaving the Tehran airport on January 8, 2020. 5 people on that plane had deep ties to the University of Windsor. Here's how they were honored today.
Samira and Hamadrisa lived with us as a family. We were all together in one house. Because of the political climate and the obvious things, I had said to Hamadrisa, perhaps it's not the right Christmas to go home. But they had counted the cost, and they had together decided they will honor their parents and go home. Oh, we miss them so much. They became part of our family so fast, and we love them so much, and their love for each other and for us, for our son, it was like we were old friends right from the beginning. It was Christmas, and we had new life in the house. We had Samira and Hamid. We ate together, we laughed together, we celebrated the holidays together. We went to church together.
It's been 3 years since we haven't seen you, beautiful souls. What we have been through is a tremendous deal of feeling of deep pain and grief for your unfathomable loss. Your absence taught us how short and cruel life could be. We still can't conceive what happened to you. Here is the liberated country, so we can speak without no fear, without no oppression. So I'm so happy here because I can say some things on behalf of my friends. I lost my friend, Samira, was my best friend. We grew up from when we were 7 years old. We grew up together. And we have a lot of dream living here and bring our children here and grew up them together like two sisters, but they didn't allow us. They didn't allow us to follow their dream.
There's a push on Walpole Island First Nation to save the Ojibwe language from extinction, and it's getting help from a YouTube creator. Ari Smith is from New York and loves learning languages, and that's what led Walpole to connect with him. Since then, he's learned to speak an Ojibwe dialect from one of the elders, and he shared the experience with his 5 million plus channel subscribers.
The remote Walpole Island on the border between Canada and the United States is a community of indigenous Ojibwe people who have been living in and around the area for thousands of years before Europeans ever arrived. Yet due to centuries of often forced assimilation, most people here speak only English, and there are currently less than 10 elders on the island who still fluently speak the ancient language Anishinaabe. Some people from the community set me up to learn the language with one of these elders, and then they invited me out to Walpole Island, aka Pekedronong, to try to test my skills with the elders and other locals, none of whom had any idea that I had been learning one of the rarest dialects of one of the world's rarest languages.
A member of Walpole Island First Nation reached out to Smith to bring a little more awareness to the language, since the community has been working to revitalize its dialect. There's been an Ojibwe immersion program on Walpole since 2015, teaching children as young as in junior kindergarten. Even so, the immersion coordinator for the local school says only 0.5% of the 5,000 people on the reserve speak Ojibwe fluently.
It's extremely important because it's a part of our identity, who we are as a people. So you think of Anishinaabe, what does it mean to be Anishinaabe? You have a whole element that is missing if you don't have the language, because it's contained within it. So our ancestors, you know, for generations have utilized and understood the language as it relates to creation and our purpose here, our intent. It hadn't really been until the time of specifically the residential schools where it gotten to the point where that colonial effort to assimilate has almost won, you know, forced to speak a language that's not of theirs, and so they don't put any value on the language that they grew up with.
For me, it's really exciting because I feel like I'm not only just, you know, making entertaining videos on the internet, like it's a chance, you know, and also not just indulging my passion for language learning as a linguist, but it's also a chance in some small way, I think, to create awareness of this really crazy situation that we have in North America, where just thousands of languages are going extinct, and even beyond the languages, people's cultures that are going extinct. You know, people really identify with these languages in a very strong way, and for me, it was actually a very hopeful and uplifting journey, because when I read that, you know, there's only 10 elders who still speak this language, it to me it seemed like a very sad situation. But actually going there, you know, it was very hopeful seeing kids, like very young kids, being educated in, you know, in the language and with local ceremonies. And so it you know, I mean, for me it's just interesting as an observer of human cultures, but, you know, I'm sure for them, like, they have a much greater interest in, you know, in seeing their own language and culture preserved.
There is an online fundraiser happening now to help pay for the mortgage for a learning center where children as young as 2 years old will learn Ojibwe. So far, $2,500 out of the $100,000 goal have been raised. CBC News has obtained provincial government documents that show Ministry of Health officials recognized that Bill 124 was a challenge to keeping nurses in the profession. The bill caps wages for nurses and other public sector workers. The documents were obtained under a Freedom of Information request, and they show the health minister was advised months ago that Bill 124 was one factor for nurses leaving. Today, opposition parties and nursing groups are renewing their call on the government to drop its court fight of the bill. Lorenda Redekop has the story.
Nurses have long protested against Bill 124. These documents are the first record of someone inside the health ministry expressing concern about the bill. They show the Ministry of Health recognized that shortages of nurses and personal support workers had become worse, and one challenge to retaining staff: concerns about wage disparity via Bill 124. This is included in a transition binder for the incoming Minister of Health, Sylvia Jones. The documents also mention nurses leaving frontline positions, with a lack of new nurses to replace those retiring. Written in bold, we must retain the nurses we have and educate more.
It's very distressing for me as a nurse to know that they had this information and yet they do not want to act on it. They don't want to make it better in the healthcare system, and that's a dishonor. It's a dishonor to every person who needs to access healthcare in Ontario.
They now have to answer to their own documents, to their own ministerial briefings. And the writing is now on the wall and the ball is in their court.
1, 2. All three opposition parties and nursing organizations say it's an extra reason for the government to stop its appeal after a judge ruled Bill 124 unconstitutional. The bill caps public sector wages at a maximum 1% a year, including for nurses.
Not only they chose to ignore the advice, but worse even, they decided to appeal despite all of it. They decided to appeal the court decision that deemed this bill unconstitutional. So it only makes us more upset.
Last month, the Premier had this message for nurses.
I just want to thank them. Yes, we're going to appeal. My hands are tied on what I can say. It's in front of the courts.
In a statement today, a spokesperson for the health minister didn't respond to the questions about Bill 124 contributing to staff shortages. Instead, she pointed to increased numbers of people studying nursing. Though the nursing organizations say that doesn't make up for how many people are leaving frontline jobs in hospitals. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Mexico for the Three Amigos Summit with President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and U.S. President Joe Biden. Trudeau's visit will start with some informal and sidebar meetings. The formal meeting between the three leaders is set for tomorrow. CBC's David Cochran has the details.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will kick off his trip to Mexico with a meeting with business leaders before sitting down for a private dinner with the national leaders on a trip where trade and the economy will dominate the agenda. Trudeau is set to meet privately one-on-one with President Biden on Tuesday before the formal meeting between all three leaders, where supply chains will be at the top of the agenda. In particular, ways to strengthen ties between the three countries in areas such as electric vehicles and critical minerals. Now, there is a shared appetite to lessen reliance on China in those areas, to create jobs domestically and also meet climate targets, but also to improve self-reliance and resiliency after the hard lessons of the pandemic. Now, diplomatically, this summit is dubbed the Three Amigos, but even between the best of friends, there are some tensions. President Biden and Mexico's López Obrador will tackle difficult issues at their shared border on migration and drug trafficking, where shipments of fentanyl are an acute concern for the U.S. president. Canada and the U.S. will also push Mexico to drop protectionist measures in its energy sector, which they argue limit investment in the Mexican economy. Now, for Canada, things with the U.S. are better under President Biden than they were under President Trump, but there are still lingering trade tensions in areas such as dairy and auto parts. There's also the lingering issue over the Nexus cards and the U.S. refusal to open Nexus processing centers in Canada due to legal concerns over their workers who are employed in those centers. Well, late last week, U.S. officials suggested that the progress had been made on this particular dispute. That's Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas said he'd been dealing with Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino to make progress on reopening these Nexus centers. A late addition to the Canadian delegation to Mexico City is Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, a clear hint that maybe there will be an announcement on that progress while the Prime Minister is in Mexico. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
A live look outside there. It's dark right now, but I hope you had a chance to get outside and enjoy the beautiful sunshine that we had, because unfortunately it's not sticking around. We'll have your full weather forecast right after the break. Stay with us. NFL player Damar Hamlin has been released from hospital just a week after suffering cardiac arrest during a game. Doctors at the Cincinnati hospital where he had been a patient say he has returned to Buffalo, where he plays for the Bills. The doctors say the athlete will continue to be monitored by a medical team in Buffalo, adding that he is doing well and is, quote, beginning the next stage in his recovery. In recent days, Hamlin has walked and done physical and occupational therapy. During a road game against the Cincinnati Bengals last Monday, Hamlin's heart stopped after a routine hit and he had to be resuscitated on the field. The game was initially postponed and then later canceled. It is time now for a look at your weather forecast. Here is Jordan Reed with a look ahead.
Well, thank you so much, and a happy Monday, January 9th to you. I hope your work week is going great. Well, it was in Windsor because you were the only city, basically, in Southern Ontario that didn't have those gray skies throughout the day today. It was sunshine. However, I'm sad to report that we do have gray skies for the rest of the work week. It was a little bit gusty. We had those southwesterly winds throughout Windsor. However, they are tapering off as we head into our Monday evening. And Tuesday, very light wind conditions as well. For your evening temperature, 0 degree. We also have some clear skies for your evening. And to start your Tuesday, we do have some snowfall in the forecast sitting at 3 degrees. And the snowfall is anticipated to hit for your Tuesday morning commute. As you can see, though, it's very short duration. It is clearing by the afternoon hours, and it's going to be that wet snow. So make sure the kids have those winter boots on so their feet don't get too cold. But I don't know if you caught that. There was another system that we are looking at bringing those mixy wet conditions for your Thursday. Snow, ice, as well as rainfall for most of southern Ontario, as well as parts of northern Ontario. But in between that, we do have 5 degrees in Windsor for your Wednesday. Those cloudy conditions lingering into your Friday for the Windsor community. But as I mentioned, we are watching this system make its way into the region for Thursday for Windsor. So your morning commute, a rainy one. It's going to pick up in intensity for the afternoon and then taper off a little bit. However, it is anticipating to transition into snow for your Friday. That's because temperatures are going to get a little cooler. As you can see, Thursday, we have those diagonal rainfalls for those in the warmer sections of Ontario. But as we head over to Friday and we go just above freezing level, we see that snowfall in the region, but sunshine for your Sunday.
And when we come back, Prince Harry's new book continues to make waves. We'll bring you the latest right after the break.
Gem.
Weekend executions in Iran have triggered a protest outside a prison and an outpouring of international condemnation of the country's actions. Canada has imposed new sanctions targeting what it calls Iranian propaganda. Other governments, including Britain, Germany, the U.S., and the EU, are taking diplomatic action. 2 men were hanged on Saturday, and video on social media purports to show demonstrators outside the prison, where 2 other men are set to be hanged. At least 3 more people have been sentenced to death for the killing of a paramilitary militia member during anti-government protests. 2 other men were executed last month in relation to the ongoing protests as well. Iran has been rocked by demonstrations and violence since 22-year-old woman Mahsa Amini died while in the custody of the so-called morality police back in September. She was being held for violating the Islamic Republic's strict dress code. The Liberal government is replacing its current fighter jet fleet with 88 F-35 aircraft. This is the purchase it previously opposed. But Defense Minister Anita Anand says the aircraft is better now than it was in the past.
Since 2015, the aircraft has matured, and we see now that many of our allies, 8 countries in particular, are using the F-35.
The cost is $19 billion. Earlier versions of the F-35 had a history of mechanical glitches. Pilots will initially train with them in the United States starting in 2026 until facilities are built in Canada. Several members of the royal family have seen their approval ratings plunge as Prince Harry's memoir arrives in bookstores. A poll released today in the UK suggests King Charles's approval has dropped from 70% to 60% since he ascended to the throne. Prince William has fallen from 84% to 69% in the last year. Harry himself now stands at a meager 26% approval rating. His book is due for release tomorrow. Some commentators say it has plunged the monarchy into its biggest crisis since the breakup of Charles's marriage to Princess Diana. CBC's Lisa Shing has more.
Family relationships.
In a series of interviews, Prince Harry continues pointing fingers and spilling secrets, blaming not just the tabloids,
who want to create as much conflict as possible. The saddest part of that is certain members of my family and the people that work for them are complicit in that conflict.
and he's naming names, specifically his stepmother Camilla, who he urged his father not to marry, whom he accuses of being in bed with the press.
And with a family built on hierarchy, and with her on the way to being queen consort, there was going to be people or bodies left in the street because of that.
Just one of the many revelations in Harry's memoir, though details have already been leaked, many of them hugely personal. How he lost his virginity, took illegal drugs, crying only once over the death of his mother, Princess Diana, and his strained relations with the royals, especially his brother.
I would like to get my father back. I would like to have my brother back. At the moment, I don't recognize them as much as they probably don't recognize me.
In London, these admissions are getting mixed reviews.
I think he actually came across better than I thought he was.
The things that he's saying is not very comfortable, but he's also a human being and has right to his own opinions.
It's a first world problem to have whatever they're going through. They should just keep it to themselves and deal with it.
Unsurprisingly, keeping mum and carrying on is exactly the way the royal family is dealing with it. At least that's the image some say they're trying to project.
By rising above it, they're actually, and not getting down into this back and forth of scandalous tittle-tattle, I think it's doing them the best job that they can do.
While Harry says he wants a reconciliation, royal watchers say that's unlikely to happen anytime soon as the prince breaks from tradition. All this just months ahead of Charles's coronation. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
A 6-month camping adventure has ended on PEI, and it wasn't even supposed to happen in the first place. The runaway is this yet-to-be-named guinea pig. She withstood the summer heat, the winter cold, and, oh yes, Hurricane Fiona. She led her keepers on a few merry chases along the way, and she scuttled back to her own home recently. Home, by the way, is a petting zoo where more adventures may await her. And that is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, you can always go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. And you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.